What's going on, y'all? Thanks for checking in with Callie. Please like, subscribe if you haven't. So you've heard me talk about Paul George and the contract extension issues and things of that nature in previous videos, so definitely check those out. But at this point here specifically, I feel like the Clippers are sending a strong message to Paul George and his team that it's a difficult process. And the process is so difficult that Brian Windhorst, as you see here, reported that the Clippers organization and Paul George is far apart or apart in regards to the negotiations of the contract extension. And now in the situation like this, that could be a problem, or it is a problem, because they really shouldn't be apart in the situation. Because if it's all about winning, if it's all about, everybody trying to be on the same page and wanting to end your career with, the Clippers here in LA, it has to be, it's more likely going to have to be some sacrificing involved. And usually situations like this, the sacrificing really mainly comes due to the fact of, several things: a lack of production, what a player brings to the team in big moments. And on top of that, who else they're trying to bring back along with Kawhi and PG to keep the team formidable, just in case they do win the championship this year. They still would like to have an opportunity to win it back-to-back years. You know what I'm saying? And maybe put up two banners in their new Intuit arena that's already built at this time by Steve Ballmer and his team. So it's like, a lot goes into the contract extension. Now, of course, Kawhi was the guy, that they signed first. And Kawhi is the guy, he is the best player on the team. And none of these players would be on this team if it wasn't for him actually coming to the Los Angeles Clippers, making them formidable enough for them to go out and get attractive pieces that they have on the team now to make them a championship caliber team. So of course they re-signed Kawhi Leonard and definitely put him in good position to re-sign. And Kawhi wanted to do it because he wanted to keep things going the way they are with this team and give them an opportunity to win. And what's driving Kawhi is the fact that the Clippers never won a championship. He wants to be the first to actually deliver. Him and the team that's built around him, they definitely want to be the first to actually deliver a championship for an organization who's never won one. The same thing he did with Toronto Raptors. Kawhi definitely is a builder. He definitely likes to build a foundation and see it start from the ground up and allow it to grow. I can definitely see that in his mindset, his game, and how he plays, and the way he's definitely willing to put a team on his back whenever he needs to help his team elevate to new heights. And that's the type of player that every organization likes to have. But in the same breath, you also like to have a second star player that's very dependable, a second star player that's comparable to the first star player. And, you definitely want somebody who, fits that mold. And I definitely understand the reason why the Clippers look at Paul George and say, we like Paul George. We like what he brings. We know what he's capable of. We know what he can do when he is actually on a hot streak. But there are moments when Paul George actually looks mediocre to a little bit above average at best in bigger moments, in bigger situations, and not being accountable in regards to his gameplay, in regards to being one of the leaders on the team through his actions on the floor. Those are some things that the front office are probably saying about Paul George, because I'm pretty sure they wouldn't be the first front office that said that about him, because looking at Paul George's talent, a lot of the games you look at him play, there's no way he should, have a lot of the games that he has where he struggles and doesn't come up when the team kind of needs him. Now, I mean, of course, some might say he came up and played very, very well in the playoffs a few years ago, which I was one of the ones who said that. He did play very well in the playoffs a couple of years ago. But that was amidst of the first round after they almost lost to Dallas, and Kawhi had to turn into hero mode just to get him out the first round. Then they go play Utah. A few games in, Kawhi gets hurt, and then, they play decent to get past Utah, uplifted by Terrence Mann, career high 39 points, which sealed Game 6, so they would have to go to a Game 7 against Utah, which they might have actually lost and never made it to the Phoenix Suns to even go to a Game 6 with them in the conference finals. But nobody really wants to talk about that part, so neither am I. We'll just leave that there. But my point is, Paul George, what they're seeing in Paul George is not enough. And like I said, he can rewrite the script, possibly going to the playoffs and being more consistent and things like that. But I mean, that's just what's going to have to happen if he really wants to, get that extension, or he's going to have to sacrifice and take less money just so they can keep, good pieces around Kawhi and himself so they can be a contender for a championship more so next year. Now, of course, they're always a contender if they got Kawhi and PG on the team, but you also want to have surrounding pieces around you that are good so Kawhi and PG can have less of a load at times. So that's going to be a huge thing right there specifically. So, I mean, I think personally, Paul George should take less money in this situation because his inconsistent ways on the court really is not generating him any progress in this situation, because they look at Paul George as like, definitely the number 2 guy on the team. But there's a lot of big games they've played this year and other years also where Paul George just doesn't show up. And then, they look at things like a year or two ago when, Kawhi was out with a knee injury, but Paul George, with the COVID situation, didn't show up for a play-in tournament game. Not saying that's his fault, but it's always something, that they look at in regards to a player like this, And of course, Kawhi's been injured too, but Kawhi's won championships. That's what separates him from players like Paul George. That's what separates him from players like James Harden. Kawhi has proven when he is right, you can win a championship with him. The other guys on the team, they've proven when they were right, they can get you points. They could look good at times, but not in the biggest moments. So, I mean, that is always value in a situation when teams are trying to extend contracts. It's more on your production. What are you doing for me now? And if you look at like last night against the Charlotte Hornets, Paul George, I think he scored his season high, I think this year, maybe he scored a little bit more in a couple other games this year, but that was one of his best games this season. But that's against the Charlotte Hornets. That's not against the Timberwolves. That's not against the Denver Nuggets. That's not against, the OKC Thunder. That's not against, teams of that nature. You see what I'm talking about? That's not against those type teams. The teams that'll give you a lot more trouble defensively, the teams that will guard you a lot more tighter, the teams that got better defenders. You see what I'm saying? That's not against a team like that. And those are the things that owners look at. What do you look like in the games that really matter? Because the matchups that they had against the Timberwolves, they played them 3 or 4 times this season. What did he look like in those matchups? That's because that's potentially a team they're going to have to play in the playoffs. They're not going to play the Charlotte Hornets in the playoffs unless the Charlotte Hornets somehow make it to the playoffs, which we know they can't, and they make it to the NBA Finals. That'd be the only way they can ever play them in the playoffs. So they're not going to play a team like that. You can X that right there, of course. So that's a given. But my point is, the owners are looking at those big key games. What does he look like then? Why should we give you the money that you want when you're not giving us the production that we want, when we're playing the best of the best competition and we're trying to be the best team we need to be? We see Kawhi Leonard going out there putting up 32 points against the Timberwolves like he did the last game that the Timberwolves had, the Clippers had won, or the game before last when it was like 89-87 or something like that. It was a very low scoring game, but Kawhi went out there and put up big numbers. He's put up big numbers against them before. He's been productive, and he's being the player that they pay him to be, consistently being efficient, damn near shooting 50, 40, 90 for a whole month of the season. Like a lot of players a lot of players can't do things like that. I mean, then the 25 out of 30 games that they won, Kawhi was like, he looked like the best player in the league. I mean, it wasn't even close. I mean, he literally looked so good because he was shooting so efficient, and he's still shooting efficient now. But it's really no knock on Paul George, because I'm not comparing him to Kawhi Leonard. But what I'm saying is organizations want to pay you based upon what they see. And a lot of these 3 for 16 games that Paul George has had, a lot of these 5 for 19 games, those things add up to owners, because a lot of those games, as I said before, they were against the better competition. They weren't against teams like Charlotte Hornets, where if you have an off game against a team like that, they overlook things like that because that's not a team that really even matters to them. You see what I'm saying? They would rather you have an off game against a team like the Atlanta Hawks or something like that, or maybe the Charlotte Hornets or the Toronto Raptors, teams like that. They'd rather you have more off games against those type teams, because those games really, they are significant because it is a part of the season, but they're not as significant as playing a team like, maybe even like I said, the Timberwolves or the Nuggets or the Celtics, or teams like that. Those games are not as significant, or the Milwaukee Bucks. You see what I'm saying? Those games aren't as significant as playing teams like that. So they rather you struggle against those sorry teams, because it's like mentally you're taking a night off because you don't take the team seriously. But they want to see you play well against the better competition, so they could feel like they have a better chance of winning with your production on the floor along with Kawhi Leonard's production. That's the way a lot of owners actually look at it. And they're not wrong for looking at it that way. They're not going to give Paul George and his team the money they want if he plays mediocre against better teams, and he plays dynamite and awesome against teams like the Charlotte Hornets. That's not good enough. So now, in my estimation, I think the Clippers really want to keep Paul George, and I really think they should. I mean, based upon what's out there, not unless they can, possibly trade him to a team and get something like overly good, better than what they have in him. Like hypothetically, this is very hypothetical. This is not true at all. But hypothetically, if the Sixers were willing to part ways with Joel Embiid and they would trade the Joel Embiid for Paul George for the Clippers, if that was a trade, and maybe with some future picks and some future assets or something like that, if that was the case, of course you make that type of trade. But that's not going to happen, and we all know that. So my point is, unless you're going to get something as good or better than Paul George, you really might as well keep him. But the only thing is, if Paul George is going to be a hard bargain, that's going to be tough for the Clippers. So really what Paul George needs to do is kind of sacrifice money wise, because he's made enough money in his career. He's still signed with Nike. I think he's still a part of that organization. He's made enough money as a player. Winning should be all that he should be thinking about at this point. So even if the Clippers are not trying to offer him this big money that he's actually looking for, if they offer him a 3-year, $110 million contract, then take that. You don't need much more. You're good. You've made enough money in your career. It should be about winning. And this is the difference between players like Paul George and players who've won championships. Yeah, the money is good, but at this point in your career, you're 33, 34 years old. You've made enough money. It should be about winning championships only. Look at Russell Westbrook. He took like an $8 million contract extension with the Clippers because he wanted a chance to win. He didn't go to a team like the Wizards again, or a team like Charlotte where he could have went there and got like 40, 50 million just to be on a team to make more money. No, it's about winning. It's about sacrificing. And that's the difference between Paul George and people and guys who really want to win. When you really want to win, sometimes it comes into the sacrificial part of the situation. And I personally think Paul George, he wants to win and have great numbers and great money. He basically wants his cake and eat it and have it to eat it too. And sometimes it just doesn't work out that way. And like I said, the Clippers organization, they're only looking at your production, basically addition by subtraction. Like, okay, so your production looks like this against the weaker teams, but against the better teams, you look like the third best player on the team sometimes instead of the second best player. That's not good enough. So like I said, unless he's going to play a lot more consistent in the playoffs, not the regular season, because the regular season is damn near over with now. Unless he's going to play a lot more consistent in the playoffs and, give him 22, 23 points a game, somewhere in there, and Kawhi do his 23, 25. They're basically matching each other, all that type stuff. Consistency. Maybe then the negotiation won't be as far apart as it is right now. Maybe it'll be a lot closer instead of apart, the way Brian Windhorst basically said the situation is right now with the Clippers. I mean, like I said, your production can change a lot. Winning cures everything. So, I mean, if he's going to play a lot better, not just better, consistent, more efficient, just consistent. Like I said, if he consistently gives them 19, 20 points in the playoffs every single night and don't miss a beat damn near, they will probably pay him the money he wants, and they'll sacrifice losing another player on the Clippers just to keep him and assure to keep him, because in their mind, he's worth it when it comes to big moments. He's worth it now because we've seen him play in big moments and he was consistent, and we could rely on his 20 points every single night in the playoffs. And while Kawhi did his thing, pending both of them stay healthy and everybody else just play collectively on the team. You got to do that. or you're going to have to sacrifice and take what the Clippers give you if you want to continue to win. Now, if Paul George really doesn't care about winning, then the reports about him going to the Sixers, possibly, and all these other reports you might see out there, well, then that might be likely to happen in this offseason because, I mean, if the production isn't there, don't expect the money to be there either.